students, I remain your facilitator on Edu2A2, Business Education Methods. Today's topic, we are going to look at theories of teaching and learning and various methods of teaching business education in the classroom. I believe you enjoy this topic. Follow me to the classroom. At the end of this lesson, I believe the students will be able to explain the terms teaching, learning, and be able to know the condition necessary for learning and different methods of teaching business education in the classroom, and also factors that affect learning. Let's start with learning theories, because for every method, you will have a theory that will guide you to use the method. Many psychologists have carried out so many experiments on learning theories. And these experiments are all about how students learn and how they will come up with an effective learning and succeed in their learning. Learning theories greatly influence teaching and learning. And these theories enable the teacher to understand students' interests, mental attitudes, individual differences, their readiness level, especially those things that motivate them to learn. Learning theories are creative attempts to find out how learning takes place in different environments, in the learner, and the means by which the learner can improve his or her learning. It is also a known fact that learning takes place easier and faster and lastingly under some conditions and methods than others. We have three learning theories in this picture. We have the behaviorism learning theory, we have cognitivism learning theory. Generally, learning can be defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior that comes from reinforcement. It must be mentioned at this point that reinforcement plays a vital role in a learning process. What do we mean by that? Reinforcement. For instance, repetition of, for instance, if a student is finding anything difficult and there's a reinforcement to back up that learner, it makes the learner to learn easily and adapt faster and succeed in his or her learning. Concept of teaching and learning. The effectiveness of a teacher depends on how students learn. And for a teacher to now know how to teach, there is every tendency that the teacher must know how the student learn. Because knowing how the student learn will help the teacher to teach effectively, and while the students will have in-depth knowledge of what he is teaching. The effectiveness of a teacher depends on how students learn, with greater is through effective methods of teaching. Know how to teach. It is necessary for you to know how the student learn, and also know the methods that you will adopt in every topic, because there are some topics that need specific methods, and those specific methods that will help the students to easily grab what you are teaching. Because if you, for instance, if you want to teach and you don't use a particular method for a particular topic, the student will find it difficult to know what you are talking about, and there must be a practice in place. When a practice is in place, like practical, like demonstration, discussion, you see that the student will be able to know and be able to have in-depth knowledge of what the teacher is teaching. There are factors that affect learning. One, difference in ability. Most students doesn't learn at the same rate. You find out that sometimes we have slow learners, we have fast learners. We have those, even after teaching, they will not still get it, except they read it again and again and again and again, and they will be able to understand what the topic is all about. So these differences in ability of learning or differences in learning is another factor that affects learning. You have motivation. If a child is being motivated, either from the home, from the parent, or from the teacher, you find out that the learner, student will be able to, will want to learn. And how would the student want to learn? Because at the back of his mind, he knows that something is coming out when he's studying or when he's reading. So, for instance, let me give you this instance when I was in school. There is one boy that sometimes when you give him assignment, he will not do the assignment. The next day, the teacher will flog him and flog him and flog him. So at the time, the teacher starts, the boy starts doing his assignment. So what is behind it is motivation, because the teacher went as far as telling the student that if you do your assignment and bring your assignment as at when due, I will give you something. And the teacher keep doing that. And that alone makes that student to be able to be doing his assignment as at when due. And till I left that school, that boy did not stop doing his assignment. You could see the small motivation that the teacher gave to that boy to be able to always do his assignments. Another thing is interest. There must be interest of the learner in what is learning, in the content, in what is learning. If there is no interest, there is no interest, the student find it very difficult to learn. And in that aspect, whatever you are teaching, it will comes from this ear and goes out from this ear. If you like, teach from morning till night, because his interest is not there, he's not getting what you are teaching, and learning is not taking place. Readiness. In this readiness, I believe the readiness will be for the teacher and for the student. The teacher will be ready with a well-planned lesson notes, with a well-planned lesson structure to help to help her disseminate his or her lesson. While the readiness at the side of the students, the teacher will make sure that he gets the student ready to learn. In readiness, it could come from environment, it could come from structure, it could come from any angle, but there must be readiness to learn. Because if there's readiness in learning, the environment will be conducive for the students to understand what the teacher is teaching. Next slide is for your activity 1. So please try and do this activity 1. Write down 5 points why interest is very important in learning. Let's continue. This time around, we are going to look at teaching business education methods in the classroom. We are going to look at 3 teaching methods. The first, the teacher-centered method. The second, learner or student-centered method. Then we have individualized method. A teacher-centered method approach is where activity is in the class is centered on the teacher. You can see the picture that the students are listening while the teacher is standing teaching. This is a method of teaching where the teacher is actively involved in the teaching process. The learners are in a passive receptive mood, just listening as the teachers teach. You could see the teacher is in charge of the teaching, and while the students, some are writing and some are just listening. And sometimes that is why in this method, the advantage is that it's so boring. Some students are even bending their face. Whether they are understanding or not, nobody knows. But you could see that there is no activity embedded in this type of teaching. Then when you look at the learner-centered method, you will see the difference between the learner-centered method and the teacher-centered method. The learner-centered method is broadly encompasses method of teaching that shifts the focus of instruction from the teacher to the student. In this picture, you could see the learner, and you could see so many methods. You see skills, you see practices, accountability, inquiry, discussion, collaboration, creation, and reflection. That is what the student practice in this learner-centered method. This instruction focuses skills and practices, and these skills and practices enable lifelong learning and independent problem solving. You find out that when a teacher uses this type of method, the student will be able to practice and they will be able to have some skills they will be able to practice, and they will be able to, they'll be able to acquire so many skills. For instance, accountability, reflection, creation, collaboration, discussion, inquiry. All these are embedded in learner-centered method. Let's look at the difference between both. You could see in teacher-centered method, the teacher is on top, which means the teacher is in charge. The teacher is in charge of this learning process. The teacher is the director. While in the learner-centered method, the learners are in charge. In teacher-centered approach, activity in the class is centered on the teacher, while activity in the class is centered on the students in learner-centered method. You could see it in the diagram. We have another method. This is individualized method. Individualized method instruction refers to the use of strategies, resources, and assessment to meet the needs of one particular learner. It is a method of instruction in which there is one-to-one teaching. One-to-one teaching means one person in the class with a teacher. This method could be used in different ways, and this method could be applied to so many ways. For instance, this method could be applied to a disabled person, somebody who cannot move, maybe somebody who the parents want the teacher to come to the house and kind of brush him up, and or maybe make him to learn, or try to make learning easy for him. It could also be used in the lesson, like teachers who want to start up a lesson for an individual person. It could also be used as a follow-up. You use it to follow up a student who is just lacking so behind, who is not meeting up. So there are different ways to use individualized method, and this type of method is just for one person in the class, and self-paced learning method on an outline of progressive goals leading to the objectives. While a teacher is using this method does not mean it doesn't take the teacher away from the objectives of the topic or the lesson. The teacher will still play the rules in teaching the person, but the fact remains that it's kind of a private teaching for the students. And most students, sometimes we see some students, when they are in the class, they won't talk. When they were in the class, you think they are not learning, or they find it difficult to learn. But when you are teaching them one-on-one, you see the kind of speed they display in getting the facts, or in getting what you are teaching them. So individualized method of teaching is specifically for one person, that is one-to-one teaching. The next slide is activity 2. Which of these methods do you consider the best to teach bookkeeping in the class? Please endeavor to do this activity. Thank you.